Hello everybody, this is Graeme, and today I'm going to be looking at a game called Atlantis Exodus. Now in this game you take on the role of one of the kings of Atlantis who must move as many citizens as they can off the island as it's beginning to sink. You help them move to other places on Earth to take up new roles, spread their knowledge, or you know what, just get them on the ships so they're not on the ground when it sinks. You've only got 5 rounds, and each round you get to take up to 3 actions, so being the most efficient is going to be critical to saving the most citizens. Now what had me really intrigued about this is kind of the rondelle. I know it's not exactly a rondelle, but it's the same idea in the middle of the board, which is where you're going to be taking your actions. Your king starts in the middle of the rondelle, and you can only move to connected spaces, which means as soon as you've picked your starting spot, you've kind of dictated or restricted the further actions you can take on that round. At the end of each round though, the rondelle is going to rotate, meaning that the course of actions you took in one round may not be available in the next round. And to me, that sounded really interesting. Along with some of the other standard things this game has, like end of game goals that you get to score at the end of the game, some in-game scoring based on how well you settled the faraway lands, and some simple card play, which can get you maybe once per round abilities or like a one-time effect. So will this game be like a fantastic cruise, or will it just be dead in the water? Let's get it to the table, see how it's played, and I'll come back with my final thoughts on Atlantis Exodus. Here's Atlantis Exodus set up. The Pillars of Remembrance cards are shuffled in the respective piles, then draw 2 of each. The Knowledge cards are shuffled and draw as many as indicated by your player count. Influence cards are placed beside the board, and randomly place the catastrophe tiles face down on their track. The cloth bag has different colored meeples based on the player count. There are 3 different colors of meeple representing the 3 different types of workers. Randomly draw workers out of the bag and fill the spots on the main board. Mix all the workshop, agora, ship, residence, and monument tiles and fill the board with the corresponding tiles. Then reveal the 3 residence tiles and take 8 monument tiles and fill the 8 spaces with them. The rest of the monuments are not needed for this game. All the coins and books are placed to one side. Each player has a player board, a king, a high priest that starts on the priest track, and their player on the turn order track. Now before getting into the gameplay, I just want to briefly talk about the preparation for the next year. Beyond the usual round beginning actions like removing and replacing workshops, ships, agoras, settlers, the knowledge cards, pillar cards, etc., you're also going to reveal the next catastrophe tile, and this will show you how to rotate the city rondelles, making sure that the gear cogwheels are connected after the turning. Now the game is played over 5 years, and there'll be a scoring after 2, 4, and the 5th year, along with a final scoring after year 5. You'll be scoring points for your settlement during the game, and you're going to do them in order. So in year 1, you'll be score for the settlers here, plus any on the ship. At the end of the game, you're going to lose points for any settlers that are still in your training area, then gain points for completed rows and columns in your settlement, points for monuments, knowledge cards, and leftover influence cards. A year in the game consists of players taking 3 turns each. On a player's turn, they'll move their king 1 step towards the outer ring. On your first turn, you're going to be placing your ring in one of the interior areas. There can only ever be 1 king per spot. On a subsequent turn, you must move your king to the next ring without passing through any walls nor going backwards. So this king here can move to one of these 4 spots. When your king stops moving, you get the bonus from that spot. If there's a guard adjacent to the spot, you can collect it if you want. If there are settlers or a tile on the spot you land on, you take and add it to the appropriate spot on your board. If it's going to the settlement board, you're going to get a bonus for what you cover. I'm going to cover a bit more about the wheel later, but for now let's just go on to the rest of your turn. Once you've activated your spot and received the bonus, you can take 2 actions. There are possible 6 actions you can take. You can take 2 different actions, or you can take the same action twice. You can move up to 1 step on the priest track and receive the appropriate reward if you land on one. You can train one of your settlers. Once you have acquired settlers, you can spend books to move them along their appropriate tracks. Or you can send a settler away. Whenever you send a settler away, you get the bonus from their training spot. You can send a settler to one of your residences you own, an unoccupied ship, a workshop as long as they meet the training level, or a pillar card, and that must be a scholar or philosopher. You can take a knowledge card. You must have the proper settlers listed on the card to take it. You take the card and send your settlers away using the same rules as I just discussed. These knowledge cards will score you points at the end of the game. The last possible action you can choose from is to play an influence card if you have one. So that is your turn. Move your king, gain the bonuses and possibly take a guard, then take 2 actions. So let's quickly talk about the Atlantis board and the things you can get there. First are just the resources, books or coins. You can draw settlers from the bag, and whenever you see flames, they're going to advance your priest along the priest track. Favorite tiles, which are placed in your play area as long as you meet those requirements. Pillars of Remembrance, we can start a new pillar or add a card to an existing pillar that you already have. They're going to give you a one-time effect when you take them, then an ongoing ability to be used once per round. You can take a workshop tile, which must be placed into one of your settlement rows, but not on the Agora spaces. You can take an Agora tile and place it in one of their sections on your settlement board. Or you can take a ship, which will go into your ship row. Now on your player board, you have a section to hold your untrained settlers of each type, and of course their training areas. Favorite tile area allows you to store favorite tiles. You can open up more spots the more rows you've completed in your settlement area. These tiles can be spent to take an additional action during your turn. When you take a ship, place it on the next open spot on your board and receive the coins only if you don't have another ship of the same type. Ships are also used for settlement scoring. They can hold one settler each, and that settler will count towards each settlement scoring in rounds 2, 4, and 5. The settlement part of your board can hold residences, workshops, and agoras. Residents do not cost anything to take, but anytime you send a settler away to a residence, you must completely fill residence on your board before you can take another one. If you do need another one, you just take one and add it to a non-Agora spot on your board. Workshops will either require generic color settlers or require a specifically trained settler to operate them. Once the workshop has the appropriate settlers, you're going to do that through the send settlers away action. That workshop will give you an ongoing ability. These, again, go in non-Agora spots on your settlements. If you get an Agora, place on a free Agora spot and gain the reward from that area. One last thing to mention is the priest track. When you reach these sections, you're going to be taking a monument, which will be end of game scoring. After each player has moved their king 3 times and done all their actions, you move to the end of year section. If this is the end of the year 2, 4, or 5, you do a settlement scoring. So you can look at the settlement section for that year and look at the settlers along that row and any settlers on your ship. For the 3 colors, players get points based on how many players they have more settlers than. So in a 3-player game, if I have more purple settlers than the other 2 players, I'd receive 6 victory points, 3 points per player. Whomever has the second most purple settlers would receive 3 points, as they have more purple settlers than just one other player. You do that for all 3 colors. After doing the scoring in year 5, you go to final scoring. For each settler left in your training area, you lose 3 points. Score points for each completed row and column in your settlement. Score any monuments, knowledge cards, and finally receive 1 point for each leftover unused influence card that you have. And the player with the most points is the winner. Let's get back to see what I thought about Atlantis Exodus. Let's get on to theme and components. The theme of this one is, I thought, an interesting one. I like the idea that the people from Atlantis were set out amongst the different continents to spread their knowledge. But that is kind of taking it a very high level look of the theme. In terms of the actual gameplay, the theme is gone. You know, moving your king to take actions, I guess, is somewhat thematic, but why are you restricted? And I think that's kind of where the theme stops. So although I like the theme, the game itself is not overly thematic. For the components, I like this rotating board and think the individual pieces are great. The iconography is decent, but I do wish the tiles that go in your settlements were a little better colored. At the end of the game, you quite often have scoring for kind of the different colors across the bottom. I wish that this was a little more apparent to make it easier to score. The rulebook is a little rough around the edges, and you might be flipping back and forth to figure out how things work. And I do like that all the cards and tiles are kind of all listed here, so if you want to look anything up, throw out the back of the rulebook in case you can't figure it out from what the card says. On to the gameplay. This is all going to come down to if you like that worker placement rondelle action in the middle of the game board. And I know, again, this is not exactly a rondelle, but it's a rotating board. And knowing that you have to pivot your strategy if someone takes your spot you're planning on using this round. With the rotations being random, it means that each round you have to kind of rethink your plans. Do your long-term strategy still work? Do you need to pivot to something else? Sometimes it's beneficial to go first in the round. And I didn't mention this during the overview, but at the beginning of every year, the players choose in player order the new player order. But the later you go in the round, the better the reward you get to start that year off. But you have less or no choice on where you actually start your king. So it does mean that one player can stay first player for the entire game, but that's going to be unlikely. The game also has a weird arc to it. At the beginning of the game, you want workers. You want to get those settlers off. You want to train them so they can be sent away. And I really, really like that mechanism. Having a workshop that requires a trained worker means you get a decent ongoing ability from the workshop and that decent sending away bonus. Or taking one of those scoring cards, as you need to send trained workers away for it. So you kind of get that double bonus for it. And it's an interesting economy. But that starts to diminish in that last round. You don't want to get workers without being able to send them away during that round. And using an action to send an untrained worker away, maybe just to go to a resident, feels like a bit of a waste. So that last round, you don't want more people because they could cost you points. It feels almost anti-thematic. When the island is at its worst, you don't want to help more people because you don't want them left over on your board and lose points for them. Definitely a clash between mechanism and theme for that little aspect. Now, I always like games where you have kind of a restricted actions to take. Here you're taking 15 king actions for the entire game. So making sure you're comboing them as effectively as possible is definitely a fun puzzle. It definitely can lead to some analysis paralysis, but I never found it to be overly bad. And although there are a fair number of ways to get points, that interim scoring cannot be overlooked. For the 3 different types of workers, you cannot let one person have the majority of all 3. So you need to be watching where the other players are placing their settlers or their sent away settlers. And again, those ships can't be overlooked as well. In some ways, I find this aspect one of the weaker parts of the game, because all players seem to need to fight for those spots, for those majorities, which means some of the other scoring is minimized. I kind of wish they were maybe fewer in term scoring to allow players to explore other means for points, because there are other ones, like the monument tiles and those knowledge cards and some other in-game scoring, but they kind of diminish because it's like, no, you need to focus on an in-term scoring. And speaking of cards, I think my least favorite part of the gameplay is those influence cards. They're almost too random. You just draw the top one off the deck. And I've had games where people got a couple that they played right into their plans perfectly. And they helped them a fair bit. Well, other players got some early on and never had a good chance to play them because they felt that they were almost useless to what they were trying to do. They are worth points for the end of the game if you haven't used them. But you only have a few opportunities to get them, and it's an action to play them, so they can be a bit underwhelming if you don't get good ones. I think if you had a choice, like a display to pick from, or maybe you get 3 and you keep 1, might help mitigate that. So, would I recommend the game? Yes, I would. If you're looking for like a mid-weight Euro that lasts an hour and a half, 2 hours, and offers an interesting kind of limited action rondel, this should definitely be one that you check out. There are several things I like. I like that the gameplay, although not overly thematic, I did like the theme. The components themselves are good quality, and I really, really like this main mechanism of this rotating board. Having you tactically plan out your round based on the movement of this rondel is definitely a fun puzzle to work out. I like the idea of training your settlers to make them more powerful when you decide to send them away, and kind of they're also narrowing down what they can become. And I found the variety of avenues I could pursue enjoyable. Each game I've played, I've gone for some different path. You know, those knowledge cards, getting a bunch of those, or maybe making sure I move up the track to get the monuments, settlement scoring. I also like that the first player action selection. Going first in the round can be very beneficial to get the exact action you want, but so can going later to get exactly that bonus that you want that's going to help you for that round. But some of the things I wasn't as keen on are that game arc. It just feels weird that in that last round, I always felt like the game is kind of winding down. Not many players are taking and training new workers. They're mainly just trying to deal with the ones they already have on their board. I found the rulebook a little confusing, and that's probably because the way it's laid out, I think that could have been better. The randomness of those influence cards seems to be at odds with the planning that you do in the rest of the game. I also wasn't a huge fan of that in-term scoring. Considering there are other options for players to score points, this is one area that kind of everyone needs to focus for and fighting for. I wish it was just an option to score, maybe through a card or a monument, but I think that's probably more of a personal preference. I also feel that at the higher player counts, the downtime between your turns can get a little lengthy and maybe makes the game feel a bit longer than it should. But again, that's going to be group dependent. Overall though, I am going to give this one an 8 out of 10 and the Dice Tower seal of approval. It is a game with a main mechanism of this rotating board that will dictate the flow of actions you can take that I've only seen a few times in a couple games, and this game does it very well. It has me thinking after I finished, maybe I should have done that instead. And for me, that's a good sign. But that's it for the moment. Until next time, thanks for watching.
Hey everybody, thanks for watching another video on the Dice Tower. Hey, do you want to know what's going on with Dice Tower? Do you want to know about our events, our cruises, special things that we're going to do live here in the Dice Tower, subscribe to Dice Tower Digest. Go to dicetowerdigest.com. It's a newsletter that we send out bi-weekly. We won't use your email for anything else. This is just to get you some information about the Dice Tower so you'll be up to date. Thanks for watching.